Caitlin Clark is your WNBA Eastern Conference Player of the Week for the third time this season. Now, I believe injury has kept her from receiving 2 of those awards. Otherwise, it could be more than just these 3 times. Caitlin Clark this past week, 25.7 points per game, 53.7% from the field, 9 assists per game, and 5 rebounds per game.
25.7 points, 9 assists, 5 rebounds, and nearly 54% shooting. That is not just a good week. That is Caitlin Clark announcing that the MVP race may have a second legitimate heavyweight.
If Caitlin Clark keeps putting numbers like this on the board, if the Indiana Fever continue to win, the conversations between who is going to be MVP of this league between A'ja Wilson and Caitlin Clark, those conversations are going to get very, very spicy. Paige Bueckers kicked out of the conversation. Olivia Miles kicked out of the conversation. Whoever else kicked out of the conversation. It's literally going to be just 2 juggernauts going head to head.
And that is where this conversation gets uncomfortable, because the numbers are beginning to force a debate that a lot of people seem determined to avoid. For most of the season, A'ja Wilson has been treated as the obvious standard, and based on her production, she has absolutely earned that position. But MVP races are not frozen in place. They change when a player catches fire, when a team starts climbing, and when the gap between the presumed favorite and the challenger begins shrinking in real time. Clark has now reached the part of the season where every game carries 2 separate consequences. The first is obvious: Indiana needs victories. The second is more political. She has to build a case so overwhelming that voters cannot reduce her season to popularity, television ratings, or fan excitement. And later, we need to talk about the detail that could decide this entire race even if Clark keeps producing historic offensive numbers, because it has less to do with her individual statistics and more to do with where Indiana finishes.
The other person, that one player of the week, the other person that's going to be in the conversation with her, A'ja Wilson, 32, 12, and 4.7. These numbers head to head, it's going to go down to the... Caitlin Clark needs to continue to put together weeks like the weeks she just had and put some pressure on these media members. The Indiana Fever are going to need to continue to win, and then that conversation is going to get very, very, very spicy.
That comparison tells you exactly how high the standard is. Wilson putting up 32 points, 12 rebounds, and nearly 5 assists is absurd. There is no honest version of this discussion where her dominance gets minimized just to elevate Clark. Wilson is an elite scorer, an elite rebounder, a defensive anchor, and the centerpiece of a team expected to contend. But Clark is creating pressure in a completely different way. She is not merely filling one statistical category. She is controlling the architecture of Indiana's offense. Every possession can begin with her scoring gravity, her passing vision, or the panic she creates when defenders step too high. When a guard is producing 25 points and 9 assists on efficient shooting, you are not measuring only what she personally scores. You are measuring the shots she creates for everyone else, the defensive rotations she forces, and the decisions opponents make before she even crosses half court. That is why one hot week matters beyond a Player of the Week trophy. It gives voters a preview of what the rest of the season could become. If Clark maintains anything close to this pace while Indiana continues winning, the argument stops being whether she belongs in the conversation. The argument becomes how much team record should outweigh offensive responsibility.
You look at the responses. Folks, this is 2 in a row. 2 Player of the Weeks in a row for Caitlin Clark. Pacers, WNBA, some fan reaction as well. Take a look at Stephanie White.
We got an Eastern Conference Player of the Week.
Yeah, fix those shorts, dude. She said fix those shorts, man. Fix those shorts.
Eastern Conference Player of the Week.
The award itself was Clark's 3rd Eastern Conference Player of the Week honor this season, and apparently her 2nd in a row. That is the kind of momentum an MVP campaign needs because weekly awards create a visible trail. They turn individual games into a larger narrative. Not one explosion, not one favorable matchup, but sustained control over multiple opponents. And notice the atmosphere around the announcement. Stephanie White is smiling, teammates are reacting, and cameras are capturing every face in the room. That matters because the Fever are under a microscope few teams experience. A normal expression can become evidence of jealousy. A slow clap can become a conspiracy. A player looking away for 2 seconds can suddenly be presented as proof that the locker room is divided. That kind of frame-by-frame speculation should be treated carefully. A short clip does not prove what an assistant coach or teammate is thinking. There could be a dozen explanations for someone appearing serious in a single moment. But the reason fans interpret these reactions so aggressively is that Indiana's internal hierarchy has been debated all season. Who should control the offense? Who deserves the most shots? Should the system run through Clark, Aaliyah Boston, or a more balanced approach? Every tactical decision now gets interpreted as a referendum on Clark's status.
Now, what people are pointing out here is the look on Brianne January's face while she's clapping. It's the damn it. Kelsey, man, I tried my hardest to get Kelsey. I tried my hardest for Kelsey Mitchell. Damn. Folks, you take a look at the close-up of, oh man, this ain't a good look. This is. And with this coach in the background, turning back saying, damn, you can't even clap. Coach looking around, man, you can't even be happy for her, huh? Brianne January is just thinking, all right, how do I get it to be Kelsey next week?
The podcast singles out assistant coach Brianne January and suggests she looked less enthusiastic than everyone else. Again, that is interpretation, not verified evidence of resentment. Nobody can responsibly determine her private feelings from a few seconds of video, but the reaction spreading online reveals something real about the fan base. Clark supporters do not fully trust the Fever to maximize her. They have watched possessions where she initiates the offense and immediately creates an advantage, then watched other stretches where she is moved away from the ball while the attack becomes slower and more predictable. So when fans see even a harmless facial expression, they connect it to a larger frustration they already carry. That frustration is not really about applause, it is about control. They believe Indiana becomes most dangerous when Clark is allowed to dictate tempo, force early defensive commitments, and attack before the opponent can organize. When the offense becomes stationary, her greatest advantage is reduced. She can still impact the game as a shooter, but using her primarily as a spacer is like buying a race car and refusing to leave first gear. This is also where the MVP race intersects with coaching. Voters judge the final production, but the system determines how easily that production can be generated. Wilson operates in an environment designed around her strengths. Clark supporters would argue that she sometimes produces elite numbers despite lineups and structures that do not consistently optimize her. That does not automatically make her more valuable, but it adds context to what she is being asked to overcome.
But now, you take a look at the past 5 games. Shout out to CDS Sports Podcast. Go subscribe. Last 5 games. Olivia Miles and Kayla Clark head-to-head. Olivia Miles, 113 points. Kayla Clark, 121 points. Olivia Miles, 28 assists. Kayla Clark, 45 assists. Olivia Miles, 1.33 points per shot. CC, 1.78 points per shot. So with all this conversation of Olivia Miles, did she prove that she's a better player than Kayla Clark? I don't know what game everybody's watching.
Now the argument pivots from facial expressions to a direct comparison with Olivia Miles. Over the 5-game sample presented in the video, Miles had 113 points and 28 assists, while Clark had 121 points and 45 assists. The efficiency comparison was even wider, 1.33 points per shot for Miles against 1.78 for Clark. Small samples always need context. 5 games do not erase an entire season, and they should not be used to permanently define either player. Miles can be excellent without being placed above Clark, and Clark does not need another guard to fail in order for her case to grow. Still, when people make a specific claim that one player has overtaken another, the recent head-to-head production becomes relevant. The most revealing gap is not the 8-point scoring difference. It is the 17-assist difference. That shows why evaluating Clark only by points misses the central argument. She can match elite scorers while also generating an additional layer of offense through passing. And assists still undercount the full effect because they do not include missed open shots, passes that lead to free throws, or advantages created before the final pass. This is where the criticism of her teammates enters the discussion. The podcast argues she could be averaging 11 assists if Indiana converted more layups and secured more passes. That exact hypothetical cannot be proven, because every star has potential assists lost through missed shots. But anyone watching Indiana can see that Clark routinely delivers passes that should produce high-percentage opportunities. Her assist total is impressive, yet it does not fully capture the quality of the chances she creates.
Then you look at all the MVP candidates. Kayla Clark, Paige Wilson, Paige Bueckers, Olivia Miles, Kelsey Mitchell, Brianna Stewart. League rankings across key offensive metrics. Points per game, Paige Wilson. Paige Wilson, she's on quite a tear this year. I gotta call a spade a spade. Assists per game, Kayla Clark, second in the league in assists per game. Points created, first in points created. Points per game created, first in points per game created. points per minute. Caitlin Clark first in points per minute. I'm telling you, folks, the battle between these two, Caitlin Clark and A'ja Wilson.
This graphic presents the broader field. Clark, Wilson, Paige Bueckers, Olivia Miles, Kelsey Mitchell, and Breanna Stewart. But the podcast's conclusion is that the race is already narrowing to 2 players. Wilson leads the scoring discussion, while Clark is presented as second in assists and first in points created and points created per minute. Those categories explain the philosophical difference between their cases. Wilson's argument begins with two-way dominance. She can control scoring, rebounding, rim protection, and defensive matchups. Clark's argument begins with offensive creation at a scale few guards can match. That phrase, points created, is important. Imagine a player scores 25 and directly assists another 20 or more points. Suddenly, her fingerprints are on nearly half of a team's offense before accounting for hockey assists, transition pressure, and defensive attention. This is why traditional points per game can make 2 players look closer or farther apart than their actual responsibilities suggest. It also creates the hardest question for voters. What counts as value? Is it the player who provides the strongest total package on both ends? Is it the player whose team would collapse most dramatically without her? Is it the best performer on one of the league's top teams? Or is it the engine who transforms an offense every moment she possesses the ball? There is no neutral formula. Every voter chooses which ingredients matter most, then often works backward from those preferences. One voter may prioritize record, another may prioritize efficiency, another may emphasize defense, another may focus on workload and creation. That is why Clark cannot merely stay close. If Indiana remains below the top contenders, she may need a statistical advantage large enough to overcome the record gap.
If the Indiana Fever can crawl up and get to a top 3 seed in the league, man, it's going to be interesting what metrics certain people want to use to prove their case. But hey, Kelsey Mitchell, I mean, if you look at this, I mean, all Kelsey Mitchell does is really just score. When you compare her to the other, when you compare it to Kaylin, A'ja, and Paige, and Olivia Miles, Kelsey Mitchell, really, it's clear that all she does is just score the ball.
And now we reach the first major condition attached to Clark's campaign. Indiana may need to climb into the top 3 for the debate to become truly unavoidable. That is not necessarily fair, but it reflects how MVP voting usually works. Team success acts like a credibility multiplier. The same stat line feels more powerful when it comes from a team competing for the best record than when it comes from a middle seed. Voters see winning as evidence that production is translating into championship-level impact. Clark's challenge is that she cannot control every part of that equation. She cannot personally finish every pass she throws. She cannot rebound for all 5 positions. She cannot prevent every defensive breakdown. She can elevate the team, but basketball still requires the other 4 players to convert the advantages she creates. Wilson faces expectations too. When a player has an elite roster, voters may assume winning is normal and focus more heavily on individual dominance. But if Las Vegas remains near the top while she posts massive two-way numbers, that combination is extremely difficult to defeat. So Indiana's standings position becomes the hidden statistic in Clark's MVP case. Not because a seed tells us exactly how well she played, but because it changes how every other number is interpreted. A 25-9 season on a lower seed can be called spectacular but premature. The same season on a top 3 team can be called transformative.
But hey, Kelsey Mitchell, I mean, if you look at this, I mean, all Kelsey Mitchell does is really just score. When you compare her to the other, when you compare it to Kaylin, A'ja, and Paige, and Olivia Miles, Kelsey Mitchell, really, it's clear that all she does is just score the ball. Even A'ja Wilson's averaging more assists per game than Kelsey Mitchell, averaging, you compare her to her contemporaries like Paige Bueckers, another shooting guard. I mean, Paige Bueckers facilitates as well. So it's definitely going to come down to Caitlin Clark and A'ja Wilson for who is going to be the MVP.
The discussion of Kelsey Mitchell adds another layer because she is producing elite scoring numbers of her own. The podcast frames her as more limited than the other candidates because much of her value comes from scoring rather than rebounding or facilitating. That sounds harsh, but it highlights the distinction between a great scorer and a full offensive engine. Mitchell's ability to generate points is essential. Her speed, shot-making, and willingness to attack prevent defenses from loading every resource toward Clark. There are nights when Mitchell carries stretches of the offense and punishes teams for overcommitting elsewhere. But an MVP case demands more than asking whether a player is excellent. It asks whether that player shapes more dimensions of the game than every other candidate. Mitchell can win a scoring matchup on a given night, yet Clark may still influence more total possessions because she is also directing teammates and collecting rebounds. This is why comparing them only through weekly points can be misleading. The podcast later shows Mitchell averaging 31 points during the relevant period, higher than Clark's 25.7. If the award were simply a scoring title, that would settle it. But Clark added 9 assists and 5 rebounds, while shooting above 53%. Her job description was wider. None of that requires diminishing Mitchell. In fact, Clark's MVP case becomes stronger when Mitchell plays well because Indiana wins more games. The tension comes from usage. How does Indiana maintain Mitchell's scoring rhythm without removing Clark from the role that makes the offense most dynamic? That is a coaching problem, not a reason to force the players into a personal rivalry.
But man, Brianne January, can you try to look excited? Can you just try to look excited? And then you stopped playing CC ball and went back to AB being the hub, coaching incompetence yet again. Atta girl, you on it, CC. Not bad for the 11th ranked guard in the day. Yeah, not bad at all. But her turnovers and her efficiency, she can't play D. What are they going to say next? Best point guard in the league. Yeah, that I don't think it's even a question. I don't even think that's going to be a question.
The podcast returns to the idea that Indiana sometimes stops playing what fans call Clark ball and shifts Aaliyah Boston into a high-post hub role. There are legitimate basketball reasons to use Boston there. She is a skilled passer for a post player. She can punish certain matchups, and operating from the elbow can create cutting lanes. The problem is not that Boston touches the ball. The problem is predictability. When the possession begins slowly and Clark becomes a spectator, the defense gets relief. It no longer has to deal with her attacking downhill, reading 2 defenders, or firing a pass before the rotation is ready. The Fever can still score, but the pressure changes. A balanced offense should not mean every player receives equal control. It should mean every player's strengths are connected. Boston can screen, roll, seal, facilitate, and finish. Mitchell can attack gaps and punish switches. Clark can organize the entire sequence and decide where the defense is weakest. When those roles cooperate, Indiana looks dangerous. When they compete for possession-by-possession control, the offense can lose its identity. That tactical debate matters in an MVP race, because Clark's box score will reflect how often she is empowered to create. If she spends long stretches away from the ball, her assist opportunities fall, her rhythm changes, the pace slows, then critics can point to lower totals without acknowledging how the structure produced them. A star should still adapt, and Clark is not above criticism. Turnovers matter. Defensive positioning matters. Shot selection matters. But criticism should distinguish between mistakes made while carrying a massive creation burden and limitations created by the system itself.
If you ladies don't speak up, you're literally working yourselves out of a job. Now, I love me some Caitlin Clark, but Kelsey Mitchell deserved. I don't think so. I don't think Kelsey Mitchell deserved. I think if anybody on the team, Caitlin Clark deserved it. 3rd time's the charm. 25, 5, and 9 on 53% is absolutely video game numbers. I'm sure the media is angry over this. Here we go. Caitlin, 25, 7, 9, 25, 9, and 5 on 53%. Kelsey Mitchell, 31 and 2.3. I mean, when you put their numbers side by side like this, Kelsey Mitchell does have the scoring edge, but she takes more shots, and Caitlin Clark, she has more than one.
Now we get the cleanest side-by-side comparison from the week. Clark posted 25.7 points, 9 assists, and 5 rebounds on 53% shooting. Mitchell posted 31 points with 2.3 assists. Mitchell had the scoring edge. Clark carried the broader workload. And this is where the central MVP argument finally comes into focus. Clark's strongest case is not that she will necessarily outscore Wilson. She may not. It is not that she will out-rebound Wilson. She almost certainly will not. Her case is that no guard may be responsible for manufacturing more total offense while attracting more strategic attention from the defense. Every opponent knows where Indiana's transition attack begins. They know which player can turn one defensive rebound into a layup on the opposite end with a pass that travels most of the court. They know trapping her can create a 4-on-3 advantage behind the play. They also know defending her normally may allow her to walk into a 3, split the first line, or manipulate the weak side defender. That creates a strange reality. Teams can devote extraordinary resources to slowing Clark and still watch her finish with efficient scoring and 9 assists. The defensive game plan is designed around removing her, yet she continues creating. That is an MVP-level trait. Wilson's answer is equally powerful. Opponents know she is the focal point and still struggle to prevent 30-point double-digit rebound performances. She impacts the area of the court where efficient offense and defensive deterrence meet. She can erase mistakes at the rim and punish teams inside, from mid-range or at the line. So the race is not a simple popularity contest between two famous players. It is a contrast between two different forms of dominance. Wilson controls space through physical presence, scoring versatility, rebounding, and defense. Clark controls decisions through range, passing, tempo, and offensive gravity. The late-season debate will depend on which form voters consider more valuable, but Indiana's record could break the tie before anyone examines the finer details. If the Fever rise into the top tier, Voters lose their easiest reason to keep Clark behind. If Indiana remains inconsistent, Wilson's combination of production and team success may become the safer choice. That is why every Fever game now feels larger than one result. Each win strengthens Clark's individual argument.
Her job is to score. Her job is to facilitate. And with AB sitting around at the three-point line being the hubba, Caitlin Clark's job is also to rebound the basketball. Because it seems like nobody on this team is actually a dominant rebounder. Nobody's a dominant rebounder on this team. I want to see what Michaela Timpson does with starter minutes. I want to see if Michaela Timpson can average 10 rebounds per game. When she's getting played 30, 35 minutes a game, I want to see if she can average that.
Each loss invites the response that the numbers are brilliant, but the team has not climbed high enough. The margin is that thin. The final basketball question raised in the source is rebounding. Clark is being asked to contribute there, because Indiana does not appear to have one consistently dominant rebounder. The podcast wonders what Michaela Timpson could produce with 30 to 35 starter minutes, and whether she could approach 10 rebounds per game. That possibility matters, because roster balance can indirectly shape an MVP campaign. If Timpson or another interior player consistently controls the glass, Clark can leak into transition more often, instead of dropping back to help secure rebounds. That creates faster possessions, easier scoring opportunities, and more chances for her passing to break the defense before it is set. It could also allow Boston to operate closer to her natural strengths, rather than drifting away from the paint simply to create spacing. She could become a more consistent interior finisher, screener, and secondary facilitator. The goal should not be choosing between Clark and Boston. It should be building actions where the defense has no good answer for both. There is still a counter-argument Clark supporters must acknowledge. MVP is not an award for the most exciting player, the biggest ratings draw, or the person who transforms the league's popularity. Those factors can shape public conversation, but voters should evaluate performance. If Wilson remains clearly ahead defensively, dominates the glass, scores more, and leads a stronger team, choosing her would not automatically prove media bias. The burden is therefore on Clark to remove ambiguity. She needs sustained efficiency, elite playmaking, fewer costly turnovers, and enough victories to make the standings argument disappear. One spectacular week opens the door. A month of this level of basketball could change the entire race, and the Fever must decide what they are. Are they a team that occasionally allows Clark to take control when circumstances demand it? Or are they prepared to build a consistent identity around the advantages she creates? That choice will influence far more than an award. It will shape their playoff ceiling. Right now, the evidence says Clark has forced herself into the serious conversation. 3 Eastern Conference Player of the Week awards, consecutive weekly honors, elite scoring efficiency, and league-leading creation metrics are not the profile of a player living on hype. They are the profile of a genuine contender. But Wilson is not waiting for anyone to catch her. She is producing monster numbers of her own, and offering an impact on both ends that Clark cannot perfectly duplicate. That is what makes the race compelling. Clark does not need Wilson to decline. She needs to become so offensively overwhelming, and Indiana needs to become so successful that voters are forced to compare 2 equally undeniable cases. So choose one. If the season ended with Wilson leading the stronger team while dominating as a scorer, rebounder, and defender, would you give her the MVP? Or would Clark's total offensive creation, efficiency, passing, and impact on Indiana make her more valuable? Drop your choice in the comments. Explain what should matter most in MVP voting. Like the video and subscribe for the next chapter of this race.